last year, Parliament raised concerns that tourism was only being developed in 3 areas, and you could probably name them with me: Johannesburg, Cape Town and Durban. But it wanted this to be expanded to villages and townships, and there's some beautiful areas around South Africa. So let's find out if any progress has been made. Let's speak to the CEO of Ubumbano, Ency Litsoane, joining us this morning. Ency, morning. It's such a pleasure having you with us. We're going to call them small dorpies, shall we, that apart from Cape Town and the half-finished mountain, Durban with their sea and Johannesburg with our cityscape, there's a whole other country that we can explore that many of us just drive past. I mean, we really should be focusing on these smaller towns, shouldn't we?
Good morning, Gareth. Thank you for having me. You are so right. We should be focusing more on the smaller towns. Everybody was hit hard. I can assure you in Ubumbano, Women SA, women struggled because whether you, like for an example in June, when it was level 3, when they started taking clients, it was hard because you were worried that you are bringing COVID into the house. So things haven't picked up. Things haven't really picked up in the small towns. It is still as dry as ever.
And Parliament's plan was to try and change this business development, business marketing, public relations, using any mechanism possible to try and get people, obviously safely, to these small towns. But when we say Parliament raised the concerns, what is the hope here? Because there's got to be some kind of plan in place to do this. Any idea what that looks like?
I must say that when you say Parliament has made plans, the first question that would come up, who are they making plans with? Are they involving organizations to implement that? Because as far as I'm concerned, the meetings that are supposed to be held virtually are just as important. If they could announce their meetings and hold meetings virtually, which will include those small towns, would work. And at this point in time, I am involved in tourism as well. I'm an executive in tourism as well. We haven't had proper meetings that will tell us about the rollouts and the implementation phases of how they are planning to uplift our businesses. Because let's talk about a small town. How do you access how do you put your business onto the map? For an example, Google, without spending a cent. How do you do that? How do you create a new website to attract clients in if you don't have access to funds? So what we need at this point is to make sure that the small businesses have access to some form of fund in order for them to transform their businesses a bit. We are working from an empty platform, because if you look at this past year, our revenues are far less than a quarter. I happen to be in the tourism industry as well. Our revenues are far less than a quarter of the previous years. So you can imagine, I'm in Cape Town and I'm still talking about far less than a quarter. Just imagine in those small towns what the strain they are going through. We're forced to diversify, but how do you diversify? I was even thinking, okay, what we can do in tourism is to create a coffee shop, is to make sure you advertise yourself as a breakfast station or something. But whatever things you think of are demanding money. How do I create a coffee shop without having the barista machine or a machine that could attract clients to have meetings at my place? Let's do conferencing. We are still restricted with conferencing, whether you are in town or out of town. Let's create events in our guest houses. You cannot have certain numbers in your guest houses. Numbers are limited. So we are just stuck on creating things and structures in the tourism industry. A tour guide.
Let's talk about how this money is going to come into the system, though, because you're absolutely correct. I don't think anyone's going to argue that in order to make money, you've got to be able to spend the money. We don't have the money to spend. People aren't going to come to the small towns, the small dorpies, because they can't be seen. So when there's this call that you're making for, let's have conferences, let's have exhibitions, obviously all done safely and or virtually, the problem comes in, and this is where Parliament, I imagine, your call, Ency, is to get Parliament to take some of the tourism budget and focus more on the small towns, the small dorpies. We see plenty of Joburg, Durban, Cape Town. We all know it's there. Is that what you're asking Parliament? Give us a bigger slice of the pie.
All I'm asking Parliament is to give us a really bigger part of the pie. And with the small towns, visit them. Visit the small towns and see what they are going through. Do your survey of how many guest houses are in the area, or what were the previous great tourist attractions in that area. Visit, because you cannot do it virtually. You're allowed at least now to go in and visit. I'm really forcing them to go there in order for them to really touch the hearts of the people on the ground. Tourism is a big thing in South Africa, and tourism has been the highest. We've been getting a highest revenue from tourism in South Africa. So I strongly feel that they should make it a priority as such. They cannot sit on their desks and watch us virtually. It is not working.